There's something about Taylor Swift that makes people react. She's not just famous, she's a cultural lightning rod. Some people worship her, think she's a genius who's revolutionized pop music and taken control of her career in ways most artists never do. Other people can't stand her, think she's calculated and manipulative, that everything she does is a strategic move designed to maximize profit and public sympathy. And maybe both things are true. Maybe that's what makes her fascinating. She was born in 1989 in Reading, Pennsylvania, grew up on a Christmas tree farm. That detail always gets mentioned because it sounds so wholesome, so American. Her parents were well off, her dad worked in finance, her mom stayed home with the kids. Taylor was the oldest, and from early on, she knew she wanted to perform. She was in local theater productions, singing at festivals and fairs, entering talent competitions. She wasn't discovered accidentally. She was hunting for it. At 10, she decided she wanted to be a country music star. Not pop, country. That's important because Nashville was the center of country music, and Nashville had rules. It was traditional, conservative, not particularly welcoming to outsiders or kids. But Taylor was determined. She started making trips to Nashville with her mom, handing out demo CDs to labels on Music Row. Everyone turned her down. She was too young, too inexperienced, not what they were looking for. Most kids would have given up. Taylor doubled down. When she was 14, her family moved to Nashville, just picked up and relocated so she could pursue this dream. That's a level of commitment and privilege that needs to be acknowledged. Her family had the resources to make that move, to support her while she chased something that might never happen. Not every talented kid gets that opportunity, but Taylor had it and she used it. She started writing songs constantly, working with local songwriters, playing at venues that would have her. And she was good. Not just talented for her age, actually good. Her songwriting had this specificity to it, these little details that made the stories feel real. She wrote about high school crushes and small-town life and feeling like an outsider, and teenagers heard themselves in those songs. That connection, that's what set her apart. At 14, she became the youngest artist ever signed by Sony's publishing house. At 15, she signed with Big Machine Records, a startup independent label. The deal wasn't with a major label, wasn't a huge advance, but it gave her creative control. She could write her own songs, have input on production, shape her own sound. That was the trade-off, and it ended up mattering more than anyone realized at the time. Her first album came out in 2006 when she was 16. It was country, twangy guitars and narratives about small-town romance and teenage heartbreak. The single that broke through was about a boy named Tim McGraw, using the country star's name as a memory anchor for a relationship. It was clever, catchy, and it worked. The song got radio play, the album sold, and suddenly Taylor Swift was a thing. But it was the second album that made her a superstar. Fearless came out in 2008, and it was massive. It produced hit after hit, crossed over from country to pop radio, won Album of the Year at the Grammys. She was 19 years old and had just beaten out Beyoncé, Bruce Springsteen, and the Dave Matthews Band. That Grammy night is also when Kanye West jumped on stage during her acceptance speech at the VMAs earlier that year, grabbed the microphone, and said Beyoncé should have won. That moment became part of her mythology, this image of Taylor as the victim, the young woman who'd been disrespected in front of the world. She handled it gracefully at the time, seemed genuinely shocked and hurt, and the public rallied around her. Kanye became the villain, Taylor became the sympathetic figure, and her career exploded even further. Looking back, it's complicated. Was Kanye wrong to do that? Absolutely. Was Taylor's career hurt by it? No, the opposite. She gained millions of supporters who saw her as someone who'd been wronged and responded with dignity. Whether she cultivated that image intentionally or it just happened, the result was the same. Her next albums continued the pattern. Speak Now, Red, each one bigger than the last. She was writing about her relationships, about breakups and heartbreak, and the guys who'd done her wrong. And people loved it, but they also started to criticize it. She was called a serial dater, someone who went through boyfriends and then wrote songs about them for profit. The media obsessed over who each song was about, tried to decode every lyric, turned her love life into a spectator sport. Some of that was sexist. Male artists write about relationships all the time and don't get the same scrutiny. But some of it was also because Taylor leaned into it. She'd leave hints about who songs were about, play coy in interviews, let fans speculate. It generated publicity, kept people talking, sold records. She was learning how to control the narrative, or at least how to profit from it. Then came 1989 and 2014, and everything changed again. She left country completely, went full pop. Synths and drum machines and production that sounded like the 80s. It was a risk because country fans can be purists, and they don't always forgive artists who abandon the genre. But Taylor didn't care. She wanted to make pop music, wanted to dominate that space, and she did. The album sold over 1 million copies in its first week, produced massive hits, won another Grammy for Album of Year. She'd successfully reinvented herself and somehow made it look easy. But behind the scenes, things were complicated. She'd been with Big Machine Records since the beginning, and as her career grew, so did the tension. She wanted to own her master recordings, the original source material for all her songs. Most artists don't own their masters, the labels do. It's standard in the industry, but it meant that even though Taylor wrote the songs, she didn't fully control them. Every time one of her songs was played or licensed or sold, Big Machine got a cut. When her contract came up for renewal, she tried to negotiate ownership of her masters. Big Machine's owner, Scott Borchetta, reportedly offered her a deal where she could earn back her masters one album at a time, but only if she signed a new contract that would keep her with the label for years. She said no. She wanted to own her work outright, and if she couldn't do that with Big Machine, she'd go somewhere else. So, in 2018, she signed with Republic Records and Universal Music Group, a deal that gave her ownership of all her future master recordings. That should have been the end of it. She left Big Machine, took control of her future, everyone moved on. Except in 2019, Scott Borchetta sold Big Machine Records to a music manager named Scooter Braun for something like $300 million. And with that sale went the masters to Taylor's first 6 albums. Everything from her debut through Reputation, all of it now owned by Scooter Braun. Taylor was furious. She wrote a public post saying she'd tried to buy her masters, that Borchetta had refused to let her unless she re-signed with the label, and that Scooter Braun was someone who'd bullied her for years. She accused him of manipulative behavior, said his clients had tormented her online, and that the idea of him profiting from her work made her sick. It was raw, emotional, and it turned into a massive public fight. Scooter and Scott both pushed back, said she'd been offered chances to buy the masters and had declined, that she was rewriting history. Other artists weighed in on both sides. Some supported Taylor, said the music industry's practices around masters were exploitative. Others said she knew what she was signing when she made those deals, that she was playing the victim card again. It got ugly fast. Taylor's response was brilliant and kind of nuclear. She announced she was going to re-record all her old albums. Since she wrote the songs, she owned the composition rights. She couldn't control the old masters, but she could create new recordings that sounded identical and then promote those instead. Fans could stream and buy the new versions, Taylor would own them, and the old masters would lose value. It was a power move, a way of taking back control even after losing the originals. The first re-recorded album, Fearless Taylor's Version, came out in 2021. It included all the original songs plus vault tracks, unreleased songs from that era. Then came Red Taylor's Version, then Speak Now, then 1989. Each release was an event, each one topped the charts. Fans embraced it, started listening to Taylor's versions exclusively, calling the originals stolen versions. Taylor didn't have to ask them to do that, they just did. She turned her fan base into an army fighting on her behalf. It worked because Taylor had spent years building a relationship with her fans that went beyond just music. She interacted with them on social media, invited them to secret listening sessions at her house, left Easter eggs in her lyrics and videos for them to decode. She made them feel like they were part of her journey, like they knew her personally. So when she told them she'd been wronged, they believed her without question and mobilized. That's power. Real power, the kind that doesn't come from a label or a manager. It comes from loyalty, from connection, from making people feel like they have a stake in your success. And Taylor understood that better than almost any artist of her generation. She'd been building that relationship since she was 16, and by the time she needed it, it was unshakable. But there's another side to this. The control Taylor has over her narrative, over how she's perceived, it's extraordinary and maybe a little unsettling. She's incredibly strategic about what she shares and when. She'll disappear for months, then drop an album with no warning. She'll be silent on political issues for years, then suddenly endorse candidates right before an election. She'll write songs that seem deeply personal, but are they? Or are they crafted to generate sympathy, to tell the story she wants told? There was the whole thing with Can I Again in 2016. He released a song with a line about Taylor that was sexual and demeaning. He claimed he'd called her, gotten her approval for the lyric. Taylor said she never approved that line, that she'd been blindsided. Then Kim Kardashian released a recording of the phone call that seemed to show Taylor did know about the line. Taylor insisted the recording was edited, that the specific lyric she objected to not just her songwriting or her voice or her ability to craft a hook. It's her ability to shape how people see her, to turn setbacks into comebacks, to make her struggles feel universal even when they're not. Most people don't have the resources to re-record 6 albums out of spite. Most people can't mobilize millions of fans with a single social media post. But Taylor can, and she knows it. She's also evolved musically in ways that are easy to overlook, because the personal drama gets so much attention. Folklore and Evermore, released in 2020 during the pandemic, were completely different from anything she'd done before. Indie folk, introspective, less about her own life and more about characters and stories. They were critically acclaimed, showed she could write from perspectives other than her own, that she wasn't just the confessional songwriter people thought they knew. Then Midnights came back to pop, but with a darker edge. And the Tortured Poets department leaned into literary references and complex emotions. She keeps changing, keeps experimenting, refuses to be put in a box. And every time she releases something new, it dominates the charts, breaks streaming records, becomes a cultural moment. She's not just successful, she's inescapable. That level of fame comes with scrutiny that would break most people. Every relationship is dissected, every lyric analyzed, every decision questioned. She's been criticized for not speaking out on political issues, then criticized for speaking out when she finally did. She's been accused of being too calculated, too fake, too perfect. And when she shows vulnerability, people say she's manipulating sympathy. She can't win, not with everyone. But maybe that's the point she's been making all along. That you can't please everyone, that people will find reasons to hate you no matter what you do, so you might as well take control of your own story. Own the parts that are yours to own, defend yourself when you need to, and move forward on your terms. That's what the re-recordings were about, not just reclaiming masters, but reclaiming agency. There's something admirable in that, even if you don't like her music or find her persona grating. She saw a system that was designed to exploit her, that would have owned her work forever while she got a fraction of the profits, and she found a way to fight back. She used her leverage, her fame, her resources, and she changed the game. Not just for herself, for other artists too. Because now labels know that artists with big enough followings can do what Taylor did, can make the old masters worthless by creating new ones. It's also worth noting that Taylor's been remarkably consistent in some ways. She's never had a public meltdown, never gone off the rails despite being famous since she was a teenager. She doesn't have a history of addiction or erratic behavior. She's maintained relationships with friends and family, seems relatively stable despite living in a fishbowl. That takes discipline, probably more than most people realize. The pressure of that level of fame destroys people regularly, and she's navigated it for almost 2 decades. But there's also something kind of ruthless about her. The way she's weaponized her fan base against perceived enemies, the way she's documented her feuds in song, the way she's leveraged every setback into a comeback narrative. She's incredibly good at playing the game, at using the system even while criticizing it. And that's smart, probably necessary even, but it's also calculating in a way that can feel manipulative. The truth about Taylor Swift is probably somewhere in the middle of all the competing narratives. She's not the pure victim she sometimes presents as, but she's not the calculating villain her critics paint either. She's a talented songwriter who's been ambitious from day one, who's made smart decisions and lucky breaks, who's been treated unfairly by the industry and also benefited enormously from privilege and access. She's been genuinely hurt by public criticism and also knows how to use that hurt to her advantage. She's someone who wanted control over her career and her art, and was willing to do what it took to get it. That meant leaving country for pop when it served her, meant going to war with her old label, meant re-recording albums in an unprecedented move that cost millions and required years of work. Most artists wouldn't have the resources or the willpower to do that. Taylor did, and she pulled it off. What's interesting is how her story has changed the conversation about ownership in the music industry. Before Taylor, most people didn't know what masters were or why they mattered. Now it's part of the public discourse. Artists negotiating contracts are more aware, fans are more engaged, labels are more cautious. She didn't fix the system, but she exposed it and showed that there were ways to fight back if you had enough power. And she did it all while continuing to make music that connects with millions of people. Whatever you think of her personally, the songs work. They're catchy, they're emotional, they tell stories people relate to. That's not an accident, that's craft. She's been writing songs since she was a kid, has put in the hours, has refined her skills to the point where she can write hooks in her sleep. The talent is real, even if everything around it is complicated. So where does that leave us with Taylor Swift? She's one of the biggest stars on the planet, has won every award, sold out stadiums worldwide, influenced a generation of artists. She's also been through public feuds, relationship drama, industry battles, and constant scrutiny. She's come out the other side not just intact but stronger, more in control than ever. She owns her story now, literally and figuratively. Whether that story is authentic or constructed probably doesn't matter anymore. Maybe they're the same thing at this point. Maybe when you've been famous since you were 16, when your whole adult life has been public, the authentic self and the public persona become inseparable. You are who you present yourself as, and Taylor's presented herself as a fighter, a survivor, someone who takes control. And in doing that, she's shown other artists